All right, welcome to another episode of the Momentum Interview Series. Today we're speaking to Mallorie Maranda, the Senior Sales Manager of Mid-Market at Envoy. Mallorie, how are you doing today?
Hi, Mo. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So we're going to kick things off with a classic question. Tell us a little bit about Envoy and the mission your company is trying to accomplish.
So Envoy is a platform, a suite of products that helps employees make really good informed decisions on when they should be going into the workplace based on who else is going to be there, who they can collaborate with. And then once they're there, it really helps everything run smoothly, right? So that they can focus on the work that matters. And then for employers, Envoy is giving them that data and that insight into how their workplace is being utilized so that they can make better informed space management decisions and potentially cost savings, right, with that information that they're equipped with. So we do have 5 products, but all part of that workplace platform.
And just based on the research that you guys have done and, keeping your finger on the pulse so far, do you get the idea that people want to come back to the office, or what's the general pulse right now around that?
Yes, so we've sponsored a lot of surveys on this. It's mixed. I think in general, folks want to come back in a limited way. Most people do not want to be back in the office 5 days a week. I don't know if most industries are going to have people come back 5 days a week moving forward, frankly. Most people want to be in the office and have that option to collaborate, to do team meetings, to see their colleagues, to get out of their house, right? I'm going stir crazy myself being stuck here. But they still want that flexibility to be able to save time not commuting every day, to be able to, schedule doctor's appointments on a day where you're not going into the office. So we found that it's really that 2 to 3 days a week, which is where that's the sweet spot.
Have you noticed any demarcations around that based on the type of industries?
So I think what we refer to it as like hybrid work, right? Which is this ability to come in when you want, be home when you want. That's being really widely adopted by the tech industry. There are other industries where that's not even an option, right? Manufacturing companies, you have to be at the plant to do your job. So we're seeing that there's a really interesting mix, and it's interesting to see how each industry uses Envoy based on if they are fully in the office or if they are fully, hybrid. I do think that there's also trends within departments, right? Salespeople, we're naturally very extroverted. We want to be in an office collaborating with our teammates, whereas you're seeing other departments kind of in our survey say, no, I'd really rather be productive at home and heads down.
It makes a lot of sense. And looking at your customer base, who would be your ideal customer?
It's truly everyone, which can be a good and a bad thing, right? Anyone who has a workplace. So we have customers who range from really, innovative tech companies to egg farms in Iowa to celebrities using us at their homes, right?
Wow.
It's such a wide range of customers. But I think that recently we've really narrowed it down to our ideal buyer is really those innovative tech companies who are embracing hybrid work. Those are kind of the folks who are moving the herd, right? So that's a big target buyer for us. But also another ideal customer would be any industry that is regulated. So I mentioned manufacturing, that's a big one. Pharmaceutical companies, for example, biotech companies, anyone who has regulations like FDA compliance standards that they need to comply to. Envoy's technology helps with a lot of that. And so it feels like 2 different ends of the spectrum, but both of those I would say are our ideal customers.
I'm still stuck on the egg farms in Iowa part. I'm just like, okay, so egg farms are one really out there type of customer. What other one can you share that's like you wouldn't have expected them to be a customer of Envoy?
Yeah, I mean, the celebrities is a big one, right? We have people literally using us at their homes to sign in, which I think is life goals if you need people to sign an NDA before coming
Into
to
your
your home.
house, right?
But I think other kind of out there customers that we've noticed are like you see a lot of these emerging companies, for example, like medical marijuana companies, right? Those are really highly regulated, and they need to, show that they're complying to all of these standards. So they've been a huge customer base for us as well that you wouldn't really think at like a marijuana farm that Envoy would be there.
You mentioned about 5 services that Envoy offers. I know about the visitors front desk management solution, as well as the rooms booking feature. So which one has proved to be the most popular service so far, and which one is the fastest growing offering?
So we started as visitor management. That's really our bread and butter. So this is kind of the check-in for a visitor going to a workplace of some sort. So I would say that is still our main core product. What we've recently added to that is what we call Protect, which is basically similar to visitor management, but for employees. So this is employee check-in. So think about like health checks currently, uploading vaccination records in this COVID world. So that I would say is still our most popular product, but what the fastest growing product is our most recently released product, which is desk booking. So this concept of hot desking, right? You don't have your own desk in the workplace. That's becoming increasingly popular for a few reasons. The first being, people have actually, Envoy is, in this bucket as well, people have hired through the pandemic. And so their physical workplace does not fit all of their employees anymore. So you need this ability to hot desk to support a greater number of employees than you have desks. So that's been a big thing for us. And then also just kind of thinking about the hybrid workplace, hot desking really helps enable that.
Speaking of COVID-19, how did that affect the growth of the business? What's one good thing that came out of the pandemic, and one not so good thing that you had to overcome?
That was a roller coaster for us. I'll start with the not good. So we were a workplace technology company, and in March of 2020, everyone left their workplace. We honestly had no idea if we were going to be in business a few months later. It really seemed like there was no end in sight. What do we do? That was a really tough time. There was a few months there that was really tough. I had to lay off some people on my team because we just were not certain of what the future was. The positive that came out of it is actually we took that moment to talk to our existing customer base and say, what do you need from us right now? You're not in the workplace, but what do you need? And through that came, hey, eventually we will go back, or hey, we have essential workers who have to be in the office, and we need a way to keep them healthy and safe and make sure that they are filling out questionnaires ahead of time to make sure we're adhering to local, state, or city guidelines, right, of people coming into the workplace. And so that's where we pivoted into Protect, and that's where we pivoted into the desk booking. And so really out of that, we came up with 2 new products, which is such a silver lining. And since then, I've more than doubled my team to, more than double of what it was pre-pandemic. So it all worked out, but it wasn't easy. I think it was a really huge test for Envoy of can we pivot very quickly? And I'm really glad we were able to.
Thinking about your current role at Envoy as senior sales manager, what do you spend most of your time doing? What keeps you up at night?
I would say my time is probably divided into 3 different buckets. So the first bucket is supporting my team through coaching, through deal strategy, getting things across the line. That's a big focus of mine. The second bucket is going to be, internal strategy, right? How are we moving this business forward? What's our go-to-market strategy? All of that. And then the third bucket, and this is the one that keeps me up at night, is hiring. That is such a huge part of a sales manager's role, especially at a fast-growing company at Envoy. I will have anywhere from 3 to 6 interviews a day with people, right? And so this is what's keeping me up at night, is how do we scale quickly and grow quickly while maintaining quality? You never want to sacrifice that. And also while making sure you're maintaining the dependencies to hire. If we're hiring 10 account executives next year, I need to make sure that we're hiring the appropriate support staff to support that appropriate number of solutions engineers, which requires a lot of internal alignment. So that's really what's just a huge part of my role that I didn't necessarily anticipate to be such a big part of a sales manager's role.
That seems to be a very common challenge when it comes to sales management roles. And we'll touch on that in a little bit, but looking at your current team right now, what are some of the friction points that are affecting it?
So part of my role this year has been actually starting up our European presence. So we have 4 account executives out in London who are doing our European go-to-market strategy. And that's exciting, but that's also definitely a source of friction, because we're sending account executives there, they're selling, they're talking to customers, but they're bringing back a ton of feedback, right, of things Envoy needs to do or change to better serve that market. And so it's a friction point, because how do we then align internal Envoy resources to act on that feedback quick enough? And that's tough. I think that's tough for any company. But for example, we don't have data centers in Europe. They're all in the US. And prospects and customers are coming back saying, hey, to sign a contract with you, we need a data center in Europe. And so it's this friction between, our product and our engineering team. It's like, we can't spin up a data center in a month. That's just not realistic. And then my AEs were like, well, I can't sell if we don't have a data center. So that has been a bit of friction, but yeah, it's just learning all about that internal alignment and expectation setting.
What other differences have you found between, how business is done in the US versus Europe?
So learning so much about this. So one thing is that European buyers, definitely its local presence is extremely important to them. So we thought, okay, check that box by putting account executives out there, but it doesn't stop there. They want localized support. They want localized customer success managers. They want localized product folks. So that's been really eye-opening. Another big thing is that I find that our European customers, they like to buy based on references a lot more than our US ones do. So they want to be able to talk to someone else in Belgium, for example, who's using Envoy. They want to actually go to their office and see it in use. And so really building up that referenceable customer base in Europe has been a huge initiative for us, because you just don't get that as much in the US, I found.
Looking at, the performance of your sales team, what are 3 key metrics that you use to judge that performance?
Because we are a platform and we sell multiple products, the number one thing I'm looking at is multi-product attach rate. So are we just selling visitors and protect, the core product, or are we also selling the ancillary products attached to it? And I think this is really important to track, because it helps us understand, is the market seeing value in those other products? But it also helps me understand, is my team equipped and enabled to sell the platform and really pitch the value of the platform versus individual products? That's a tough skill to learn as a salesperson. So that's one I look at. The other one goes a bit hand in hand with this, but that's average deal size. I think that tells you a lot about a salesperson. It shows, are you attaching the multiple products? Are you pitching kind of our higher tiers? But it also gives insight into discounting, right? Are you discounting a lot and bringing your average transaction size down? The third I would look at is actually super important, and that's renewal rate. So I've been at companies before where you have a top performing AE, but they have the lowest renewal rate. And to me, that is such a huge red flag. That means that AE is not qualifying their customers well. It means they're potentially over-promising and under-delivering. So that's something that I look at really closely is, are we selling good deals? Are we selling deals to customers who truly need Envoy and will be happy using Envoy and will continue to renew? Because, and the SaaS model, you're only successful if your customers renew, right?
Exactly.
You're not making money on their first year. So that's a big initiative for us too.
I love that. And that's such a great point about how, you can get them into the door, but can you get them to stay and want to stay and renew whatever it is that they're buying? I love that. And so let's talk tools for a little bit. What's your sales stack like at Envoy? What kind of tools are you looking to add to the stack of the coming weeks and months?
So we have Salesforce, of course. We use Gong for call recording and call coaching. They're an incredible tool, especially as we're hiring so many people. It's so helpful to just give them a list of calls to listen to in Gong. But I've also found that a lot of Gong's AI features as a manager have been really helpful to me, of flagging deals that might be at risk because certain things were said, or flagging which competitors we're hearing. It's been fascinating to see the difference in which competitors are mentioned in our European deals versus our US deals. They're drastically different. And then what we're looking to add in the coming weeks is, we actually just signed a contract with them, Atrium. So they're kind of like, they link with your Salesforce, with your Gong, and they're really this sales analytics tool for managers that is able to kind of provide insights that you might not necessarily know you should be looking for. So Salesforce is incredible if I know what data I want to pull in a report. The Atrium is kind of feeding me data that I didn't even know I should be looking at. So that's one that I'm really excited to dive a little bit more into.
What are some of the trends in sales that companies should be aware of?
Virtual selling. When I started out in tech sales, there was this big emphasis on going on site with the customer, big meetings where you bring everyone in, you provide lunch. I think that sales is, interestingly enough, becoming a bit more transactional now. And so that's one of the trends I've been seeing. I've also found that post sales is so important. We hear this in almost every single conversation with our prospects, is what does your post sales look like? And that's because people have been burned by companies before, right? They've been kind of left high and dry. And so that is becoming such a key part. And I think that that's a big differentiator for Envoys. We can talk about our post sales process and what that looks like. And then I think people are really more concerned about data privacy, data retention, especially with Envoy, right? Like you're putting your visitors and your employee information in this system. And so we see that a lot of like, hey, we came to Envoy because we were looking at another company and their data privacy standards weren't enough. So that's been really interesting to see how important that is to buyers.
And then switching to culture for a little bit, what kind of culture has management tried to build at Envoy, and how's that been going?
So we have 5 core values that we really reiterate as often as possible. So they're create great experiences, pitch in, stand out, communicate openly, and choose action. So I feel like that really encompasses our culture. My favorite personally is pitch in. It's just really this theme of we are successful as a team and no job is too small for anyone, right? And I think that I would say it's going well. We really try to emulate this from the top. I see this from our head of sales, Justin, right? He will pitch in for anything. He will jump in on calls if I'm busy with my team. And I try to emulate that as well, right? Taking on a lot of projects that are maybe outside the scope of my role. And so I do think that it's easier to do when it's coming from the top, and when leadership is really exhibiting those values. But in a COVID world where we're mostly remote, that's tough. It's tough to see examples of people pitching in this remote world. It's harder to collaborate. You can't just, run into a conference room and strategize on a deal or help out with a project. It has to be more intentional. So I think that that's something that we're trying to work on, is being more intentional with doing it, but also with recognizing it, because nowadays a lot of pitch in goes unnoticed because we're all virtual.
What's one trait or achievement in a candidate that make you instantly swipe right?
Curiosity, which can be hard to pick up on, but I think a salesperson has to be so naturally curious, because that's what you're doing throughout the sales cycle. Is you're learning about someone's business, you're understanding what keeps them up at night and how you can help. So when I do an interview, I say at least 10 minutes at the end for them to ask me questions. And I'm judging that just as much as I'm judging the way they answered my questions, because I want to know, are they thinking about this really critically? Are they curious about our business? What are they wondering about Envoy? So that's probably my biggest one.
I love that. And on the flip side, what character trait or statement would be an instant red flag for you?
Probably anytime they badmouth a former employer, right? I think that there are definitely situations where they were coming from a bad environment, which I understand. But I think if they have the maturity to paint that in a positive way of what did they learn from it and what are they looking for moving forward, that to me is much more attractive than a candidate who spends a lot of their interview bad mouthing and playing the victim, right? I think that that's something that is a big red flag for me, because chances are they might do the same thing at your company.
That's fair. That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
And, speaking about previous careers, I love your career trajectory, by the way. You've had a long, varied, and super interesting career with roles in legal, HR, academia, sales. What's been the most enjoyable aspect of your career so far?
Where I am now.
Oh, that's a good answer.
Tech sales. I do, though. I think I really feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm so competitive, and tech sales just brings that out in a really fun way. But yeah, it was an interesting road, right? I knew nothing about tech. I knew nothing about sales. I thought I'm naturally pretty introverted, right? I think I'm an extroverted introvert where I can turn it on and I love connecting with people, but I always thought there's no way sales is for me. That's such an extroverted person's job. But since really learning about it and learning how it really sales is consultative, in this day and age, and that has just really resonated with me. And I truly, for the rest of my career, cannot imagine doing something else. I need to be close to customers. I need to be getting that thrill of winning deals. It's really the best.
I sincerely feel for anybody who's going to be on the opposite team in 30 seconds. My condolences to them and the number of points they will not win with you.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, I mean, would you say there's been a common professional thread between your previous roles, or have they kind of vastly differed from one another?
I think the thread is people focused, right? In every single one of my roles, there's been this interaction with others and this interaction with people. And that is such a crucial part, I think, to anything that would fulfill me. Yeah, I would say people is that common thread.
I like that. And then speaking of people, some people work best as independent contributors and others as team players. Now, obviously, in your current role, you probably have to be a lot more of a team player than in previous roles, but how has your own collaboration style changed over your career?
Drastically. I was very much an individual worker. I'm an only child. Every sport I played growing up was an individual sport. So I am not used to being on a team. And so really the way I'm such like an efficient kind of type A person that for me, it was like heads down, I control my work, I control my destiny. But I think sales has really taught me, even when I was an individual contributor in sales and not leading a team, it's still all about teamwork, right? You have your supporters, right? You have your solutions engineers, you have your managers, you have your support staff, you have your customer success managers, and you need to work as a team to be successful. You will not win alone. I think I learned that the hard way one too many times. So that really helped me realize that I need to be a good delegator. And if I can delegate well and really clearly set expectations, that will set teamwork up for success. And then, of course, as a people manager now, that is such a big part of my role, is collaborating with my team and my reps, but also the other sales managers and working together. So I've come a long way for sure.
Absolutely. And switching a little bit to productivity tips are usually highly subjective, but what's your best productivity tip?
Ooh, I love this. The 2-minute rule. So this was coined by David Allen. He has like a book on productivity, and it's essentially, if there is a task that you can do in 2 minutes from when you're given to it, you must do it immediately. Which seems so simple, but how many times have you gotten an email, read it, and been like, I'll get to that later, mark it as unread, and then you go back to it. And his point is, all that time of context switching, now when you go back to the email, it's going to take you so much longer. And so his tip is, as soon as you open that email, if you do kind of a mental check of how long will it take me to respond, if it's 2 minutes or under, you should immediately do it. And that has just been game changing for me. I tell that to all my new hires on my team. Is like, I mean, like you said, it's subjective. You don't need to do this, but this is what's worked for me. And it's really been game changing.
Which other books or podcasts or shows are you currently reading or binging on?
Yes. So the Bad Blood podcast, this is John Carreyrou. He wrote the Bad Blood book, which was all about kind of exposing Elizabeth Holmes. He was a Wall Street Journal reporter who really was the first to shed light on the quote unquote fraud that was Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes. And so her trial is going on right now. So this Bad Blood podcast is following like what's happened since he released the book, and then each week doing updates based on the trial. So it's super fascinating. I mean, Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes were in their heyday when I was starting college. I remember having her Fortune cover in my room tacked up because it was like, this is this powerful woman in Silicon Valley. This is the dream. This is who I aspire to be. So it's been disappointing and fascinating at the same time to kind of see her downfall. So highly recommend if you're into that.
Bit of a sidebar. I mean, it just got me thinking now. When it comes to movies and shows, what type of genres are you into?
I'm all over the place.
Mm.
I think that I love a good like mystery suspense, but I'm such a chicken, so nothing too scary, nothing spooky, nothing supernatural. I will not sleep. So I got to keep it kind of light. But I do like kind of a good suspense, a good like legal thriller.
Mm.
Yeah.
Legal thrillers. And then if you
Yeah.
weren't working in sales, what would you be doing instead?
Hard to imagine. But I think kind of on that note, I would love to have been like an investigative journalist. I think that there are so many parallels to sales, right? You're digging for the truth. I'm stretching a little bit here, but you're
No,
asking
you're
questions and you're
100% correct.
uncovering.
Yeah.
So I think that I don't know, that's what I love about sales is kind of digging, and then like creating value and making that
Mm.
case. And I think you do that in journalism. I guess you do that in law too. So that could
Mm.
be interesting too.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe one of those two.
Yeah, because I mean, when you mentioned Theranos earlier, and you were talking about how you enjoy legal thrillers, I figured when it comes to television shows or movies, you'd enjoy crime documentaries. And so when you just said investigative journalism, I was like, yep, that's it. That's it.
Yep. Exactly. I live vicariously through those.
So, final question for you. If you were starting your career all over again, what would you do differently?
I think something I didn't understand in the beginning of my career is the importance of your network.
Mm.
So I would really focus on that earlier in my career because as someone who is kind of introverted, sometimes I was shy to make those connections, especially early in my career where you're not coming from a place of confidence. And I think that I really wish I would have tried to make more connections, learn more about other roles outside of my department, because there's so much you can learn from getting to know people who are doing jobs that are vastly different than yours. So I wish I would have put a stronger emphasis on that earlier in my career.
That is a great answer. Definitely network more. Mallorie, it's been fantastic speaking to you. We've gained some excellent insights in this, and I'll catch you next time.
Sounds good. Good talking, Mo.